Hello everybody, welcome or welcome back to the channel. Happy New Year and welcome to yet another monthly reading wrap up. And I cannot believe that this is the last wrap up of 2025. I do want to do eventually like a tier ranking of all of the books that I read last year in 2025. I think I managed to read like a bit over 140 books last year, and I just want to tell you which ones I believe are worth to be read and which ones are kind of like not it. But I just know that that video is going to take me a long while to film and to edit. So for the moment, let's talk about all of the books that I read in December of 2025, starting with a very highly anticipated read for me personally, and that is Hot Wax by M.L. Rio. I bought this book immediately when it was published, like on release day. I went to the bookstore and bought this book, and then I read a bit from it, and then I wasn't really like in the mood for this book, so I just decided to soft DNF it, and I finally read it at the beginning of December. And unfortunately, this book didn't really work for me, and I don't think I will read books like these in the future, just because earlier in 2025, I also read, I think it was called Deep Cuts by Holly Brickley, something like that. And it also centers themes of like music in the 80s, in the 90s, and stuff like that. And that one fell like really, really flat for me. So I just don't think that this type of books are for me personally. This one, though, I expected it to be more like a contemporary fiction, let's say like literary fiction. And it was that for the first half of the book. And then in the second half of the book, it just kind of like transformed into this thriller. And I could see it coming. I saw the signs from the beginning of this book. And I kept thinking, please don't be this. Please don't be a thriller. And unfortunately it was, and that kind of like ruined everything for me because it just didn't seem that believable, because the first part of the book was so well done in my opinion. The writing style that Emma Rio has refined over the years, like it truly shines in this book. And I just loved the characters and the settings and how the story was told in the first part of the book, and then everything went like off the rails in the second part. And I was just like a bit, you know what, we didn't need to do all of that. And that's just my opinion. If you liked it, by all means continue liking it. But yeah, this was disappointing. I loved If We Were Villains. I liked Graveyard Shift, and this one was just not really it for me. So yeah, this is Hot Wax by ML Rio. Let me know if you read this book. What were your opinions on it? Because I feel like there's like a specific type of reader that this book can really work well for, but unfortunately that reader was not me. So once again, Hot Wax. I feel like all of these books were kind of like highly anticipated for me, and at the end of the year, I kind of like tried to read everything that I was like super excited to read. And the next book that I read is Snake Eater. It is T. Kingfisher's newest release, and I loved this book so much. I think I also talked about this book in one of the other videos that I posted here on the channel in December, but this was such a joy. What really stood out for me in this book is the diverse cast of characters. Like, I think the Kingfisher is known at this point for having like a very diverse cast of characters that come from all backgrounds, in all shapes and sizes, and all of these characters have very unique problems to them, but those problems are like real problems that we are also dealing with in our day-to-day life. And this book has a character that I think deserves like a spin-off book or a book of their own, let's say. And I'm talking about Grandma Billy, but more on that in a second. Yeah, I absolutely adored this book. T. Kingfisher has, I think, like two or three upcoming releases in 2026, and I'm just like so excited for them. Anything that T. Kingfisher publishes, I'm just like eating it up every single time. Let me tell you a bit about the plot of this book. We are following our main character, Selena, and currently, like at the beginning of the book, she's dealing with a lot in her personal life, and she just decides to flee and go visit her aunt in this very small town in the middle of the desert. The problem is that her aunt doesn't really have like a phone number or like a specific address. Selena just knows that her aunt lives in this town. And once she arrives there, she unfortunately discovers that her aunt passed away a year ago. Because she doesn't really have any money to go back home, she decides to stay in her aunt's house. And a lot of just like weird, unsettling things start happening in this house and to Selena. The people from this town seem to be venerating these gods, these deities that she doesn't really know anything about. But her luck is that everyone in this town is willing to help Selena overcome her trauma and her struggles that she's dealing with. And there's just like this really heartwarming moment towards the end of this book where she's confronted with her past, let's say, and everyone in this town is standing up for her, and they are just like defending her and wanting the best for her because they see how she struggled with a lot in her past. Selena's neighbor, Grandma Billy, I'm not gonna spoil anything about this character, but just know that her backstory is insane. And as I said, T. Kingfisher, if you want to write a spin off sequel, if you want to turn this into a series, I would eat it up. We want to know more about Grandma Billy, please. I know I'm not the only one. So, yeah, this was Snake Eater by T. Kingfisher. Would highly, highly recommend. And I think I would recommend like any book by T. Kingfisher. I still have like a couple of books to read from T. Kingfisher. I was going through her back catalog in 2025, and I also read the newer releases. So I still have to go through some of her books, but I'm just so excited to read anything that this author writes. So this was Snake Eater. I read Alex E. Harrow's newest release, The Everlasting. I read like exactly 1 year ago, I read The Six Deaths of the Saint by the same author, and that novella, I think it was like 30 or 30 something pages. And that was so impactful to me. Like, I loved that novella so much that when I heard that this author is going to come up with a full novel based or like inspired by The Six Deaths of the Saint, I just knew it's going to be marvelous. And this book delivered. Like, it was really good. I could definitely see like the inspiration from the source material. I think if you read The Six Deaths of the Saint, you can clearly see like where the story is going and what it was inspired by. But I just love how Alexi Harrow wrote this story, and I just love the characters so much because even though it is reminiscent of The Six Deaths of the Saint and the plot goes in that direction a lot, these characters are new, and the setting is also new. So in The Six Deaths of the Saint, we were following our main character who was kind of like a soldier for the king of that world, and the king was like very power hungry, and he basically transformed our main character, who was like a young girl, into this soldier that was willing to die for the king like over and over again until she kind of realized that she didn't really need to do all of that to feel love. If you did not read The Six Deaths of the Saint, I would highly recommend you do so because it is such a short work, but it is amazingly done. In this book, though, we are not following the soldier, if you will. We are following a historian. I already forgot their names. I'm like so bad with names. Owen and Una. Okay, so Owen is our somewhat main character, but after a certain amount of pages, Una becomes our main character as well. They're kind of like both at the forefront of the story. But at the beginning, Owen is a historian, and he is doing all of these kind of like essays or like works about a specific figure from this kingdom's past, and that figure is Sir Una Everlasting. And Sir Una Everlasting is like a pivotal historical figure in this kingdom because she sacrificed herself for the kingdom and for all the people that lived in this kingdom. And everyone seems to be like very obsessed with Una Everlasting and what she did in order to preserve the kingdom in its entirety, basically, and to keep it safe. Owen wants to discover what really happened and what was really Una's past. One day, he receives a mysterious book from an anonymous sender, and once he starts translating that book, he discovers that that was really like the story of Sir Una Everlasting. But this book disappears, and the story kind of unfolds from here, and we might learn that a specific someone is kind of like traveling through time and making Owen and Una do all of these like crazy things just to secure power, I guess, and to make sure that the history is going to repeat itself. The plot itself can become like a bit repetitive. I didn't feel like it was boring just because of the teeny tiny changes that Alex E. Harrow makes every single time, and as a reader it's just like so exciting to read the new version of that cycle of life for these characters and to see what were the changes and to see what went wrong and to see that they are going to end up basically in the same place in the end until they don't. This is The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. Once again, if you read The Six Deaths of the Saint, I think you would really enjoy this book. If you didn't read The Six Deaths of the Saint, I would suggest you go read that novella. It's available on KU. It is very short. You will be able to read it in like 1 or 2 hours. And then if you end up liking that one, go ahead and read The Everlasting. Next up, I went back to a fantasy world that I was obsessed with like a couple of months ago when I first read The Priory of the Orange Tree. I'm obviously talking about the continuation of the Roots of Chaos series by Samantha Shannon, and in December I did read the other two books in this series. So earlier this year I read The Priory of the Orange Tree, and now I finally read the prequel as well, A Day of Fallen Night. This is somehow bigger than The Priory of the Orange Tree, and that book was just massive. This book was such a joy to read, and I really appreciated the fact that this went in like a slightly different direction than the first book, because the first book, The Priory of the Orange Tree, is a standalone. You can read it as such and kind of like be done with this world. But something that I wished a bit more from the first book, from the Priory, was to actually spend more time in the Priory of the Orange Tree and to spend more time with the Prioress and with the sisters of the Priory, because I just think it's such an interesting concept, and I wished it was developed a bit more in the first book. But fear not, because this book did exactly that. We spent a lot of time in the Priory this time around, but not from the point of view of the Prioress, but from the point of view of a sister of the Priory. And I think that was such a nice touch to have this point of view that's not of the person in power, let's say, but from a completely different direction. And it did everything I wanted and more. Like, I just enjoy this world of the Priory of the Orange Tree so much, and I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible because I don't want to spoil anyone if you did not read the prequels to the Priory. But yeah, this delivered. I have no notes. It is very character driven, so nothing changes in that front from the Priory of the Orange Tree. The plot kind of comes secondary to these characters and to their stories. If you want more from the world of the Priory, I would highly recommend A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. And then, because I wanted to kind of conclude the Roots of Chaos series and to read everything that was published in this world, I read Among the Burning Flowers, which is kind of like the newest addition to the Roots of Chaos world. This is, I would like consider this a novella. It is like 260 pages, but given the fact that the other books are 800 and 900 pages respectively, I would consider this a novella. Like, this just feels like a very short entry in the world of Roots of Chaos. This specific book follows Morosa Vatilda, and we get to see kind of like her past and how she ended up in the situation that she's in the Priory of the Orange Tree. If you read that book, you know that we meet her at a specific point in that story, and we get to see like a glimpse of what happened to her or what's her story, but we don't really know how she ended up in that situation to be kind of like a prisoner in her own kingdom, without giving too much away. But this book explores that and explores the story of resilience of this character and what she had to go through to end up in that sticky situation. Let's say this book is just gorgeously illustrated. There are full on like illustrations kind of like this in this specific edition that I have, and then there are also kind of like portraits of the characters. If I can find one right now, that would be great. For example, this one, and it also has this gorgeous sprayed edges. I just love them. I think they look really, really cool. One thing that really stuck with me, and I think it's just like so powerful, it's towards the end of the book, and let's see if I can find the exact quote that I'm thinking of right now. That's what happens when you don't annotate when you read. Oh, right here. So it says, this is not a spoiler, by the way, because we already know this in the Priory of the Orange Tree, okay? So it says, and she, a puppet, a prisoner, a princess, would remain on the throne, unable to leave, until the day that Fiordel fell, as he had once before, on the last day of the grief of ages. And I just love that description, a puppet, a prisoner, a princess, because this is what she truly is when we meet her in the Priory of the Orange Tree. And I love the nod back to A Day of Fallen Night and to that specific event from the end of that book. If you're thinking of reading these books, if you're thinking about reading the Roots of Chaos series, my recommended reading order would be to read them in publication order. So go first with The Priory of the Orange Tree, and then A Day of Fallen Night, and then Among the Burning Flowers. But if you are intimidated by how big these books are, you can also technically start with Among the Burning Flowers, then read The Priory, and then read the first prequel, which is A Day of Fallen Night. You can read them either way, truly, it doesn't really matter, but I do think that if you read them in publication order, you get these like really, really cool ties between the books. I think at the end of this book, A Day of Fallen Night, I kept switching between the physical version that I have right here and also the audiobook copy that I had. And there's this interview with Samantha Shannon in conversation with, I think it is Sara El Arifi, if I'm not mistaken, but they basically talked about the process of writing books in the world of the Priory of the Orange Tree, and the way that Samantha Shannon spoke about her writing process, you know, like coming up with a map and with the places and how the kingdoms are kind of like segmented to kind of like make sense why the specific characters are in those specific places and stuff like that. That was like really cool to hear. And if you have the chance to listen to that conversation between the two authors, I think it's an amazing insight into writing books in general and what authors kind of like go through and what is their process when writing a book. Something also that I found really fascinating that Samantha Shannon mentioned in that conversation, in that interview, she kept thinking about how the language would change because we meet this world in the kind of like present timeline of the Priory of the Orange Tree. And because we go back so much in time in A Day of Fallen Night, she kept thinking how the language would change, and she accounted for how the language would evolve from this book to the Priory of the Orange Tree, and she changed some things up. And I was just like so in awe of that concept, because historically in our real world, like, it makes sense. Obviously the language changes and evolves, but I never thought about it in like a fantasy sense, and how these things would be accounted for in a fantasy setting. So I just found that really fascinating. So would highly recommend, if you have the chance to listen to the audiobook, don't skip the last part with the interview between Samantha Shannon and Sarah L. Arifi. So yeah, these were my 2 cents on the Roots of Chaos series by Samantha Shannon. If it wasn't clear, would highly recommend these books. Speaking of finishing series, I also finished Akotar in December, and oh my god, like, I had such conflicting feelings about this book. Let's start with A Court of Frost and Starlight. This book pissed me off so much because it didn't bring any value to the world of Akotar. Like, we don't learn anything new. It's just like the characters kind of like giving each other winter solstice gifts. So I was just like mad when I read this. Like, yes, I read it in a day, and I think I finished it like in the middle of the night, but I was just so pissed that I wasted my time with this book. It's not that it's badly written or whatever. It's just not bringing anything new, and I don't know why I wasted my time continuing reading this book. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, I'm still mad about it, as you can see. But then moving from Frost and Starlight to A Court of Silver Flames. I don't know if you remember this, but I think I said this in the videos prior to actually starting reading this series. But because I pretty much already knew what's going to happen in this series, like from start to finish, I knew the true line of the plot, let's say. I predicted that this book is going to be my favorite, and it was not. Like, I just found this so incredibly long for no reason. I understand why we get to spend so much time with Nesta at the beginning of the book. Well, at the beginning, like for the first like 70-ish% of this book, like, Nesta is just insufferable. It is understandable because she goes through a lot, but I just don't know why we get to see that in so many pages. Like, I think this can be condensed to half of the size of this book, in my opinion. But I'm also not a fan of the sex scenes in this book. They just kind of like cringe me out. I guess I don't know how else to describe it, but the more I read Sarah J. Maas books, the more I realize that I don't necessarily like how she writes sex scenes. And now I'm finished with Sarah J. Maas. Like, I read Throne of Glass, I read Crescent City, I read Akotar, and it's just not something that I would gravitate towards. And the sex scenes in this book were a lot. Like, the first one was manageable, but then the other ones were just like so over and over again, and I was like, okay, let's speed this up. Let's get this over with already, you know. And yeah, this was okay. I wouldn't say it's my favorite in the series. I still think my favorite is potentially the second one, A Court of Mist and Fury, I want to say. But yeah, this was like a disappointment because I expected to love this book, and I ended up just thinking it was fine. And then the last physical book that I read in December is Dark Fairy Tales by Victor Wind, and this book has gorgeous, well, they're gorgeous in the sense that I really, really like how these illustrations are done, but they're quite gruesome in how they look. But these illustrations from this book are done by a Romanian illustrator. Her name is Luciana Nedelea. She's from Transylvania, and I just love how this book looks. Like everything was done with traditional means, and um, it's just a joy to look at. The some of the details, as I said, they're pretty gruesome and gross, but that is just to illustrate these stories from this collection of dark fairy tales. These are the edges, as you can see, and they kind of like wrap around the bottom of the book and also the top of the book. Hopefully my camera can focus on the actual edges. Okay, the kind of like secondary title of this book. Oh, also, let me show you the map, because we have a map at the beginning of the book, and also I think there's one at the end of the book on the end papers. The second title of this book is something not suited for children. Stories from around the world that are definitely not suitable for children. Um, Please don't buy this book for your children. The fairy tales in this book are very just like mature, and they're dealing with like a lot of kind of like serious issues. I would say that are definitely not fitted for children. So this was so weird and gross and dark. And this book was everything I wanted it to be. Here's another illustration. But yeah, this was such a joy, and I slowly read through this book for like a couple of days. Like at the end of each day, I kind of like went and read like a couple of fairy tales from this book. This was really cool. I think it would be a great gift for someone that's passionate about fairy tales or stories in general. And yeah, this is Dark Fairy Tales. My copy was kind of damaged during shipping, but I think it just kind of adds to the charm of this copy. So this is Dark Fairy Tales by Victor Wind and illustrated by Luciana Nedelea. Okay, now that I'm done with the physical books that I read in December, let's talk about the ebooks that I read last month, because I went to visit my parents for like the second half of December, and I didn't want to carry anything with me other than my Kindle when it comes to books. So I decided to read some of the ebooks that I had sitting on my Kindle for quite a while, starting with Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. This book was so good, and I would expect nothing less from this author, to be honest. At the beginning of 2025, I read Don't Let the Forest In by the same author, and that book was also really, really good. Hazelthorn was exactly what I expected. We have this creepy mansion called Hazelthorn Manor, and it just seems that the owner of this manor is just like very mysterious, and he's doing some shady things, and we don't really understand what they are until further on in the book. But our main character is pretty much sequestered in his room in this like super big house, and we don't really know why that is. We get the information that he went through a lot of surgeries. Again, we don't really know what they are for or why he needed all of these surgeries. And the story kind of like starts to unfold very, very rapidly once the owner of the estate dies, and we don't really know who killed him. So it's kind of like a murder mystery, but in the same time, you pretty much know what happened, because there's a specific line a character says that kind of like tipped me off for everything that was about to come, but it was still very, very enjoyable. I loved how atmospheric this book was. I loved the descriptions of nature, of the garden from this manor, and of the creepy like interiors from Hazelthorn. I just love that this this book exists. I just love that it is so dark and yet so funny and so deep in the same time. Like I just love it so much. I know that CG Drews is gonna come out with two books, I think, in 2026. The first one is gonna come in spring, and the second one is gonna be released in the autumn, I believe. So I'm looking forward to new releases from CG Drews. This was Hazelthorn. And then, oh my god, I read another book that was so good. I read Heart the Lover by Lily King. I cried so much when I finished this book. It was again the middle of the night, and oh my god, this book was immaculate. So, in this book, we are basically following our main character when she's in college in the first part of the book, and we are just following her as she's trying to make friends, as she's dealing with boyfriend kind of like issues, as she's just trying to navigate this college life that's very confusing, let's say, or that can be very confusing. And in college, she kind of finds her soulmate, and her life kind of goes in a completely different direction that didn't really work out between her and this boy. And she just ends up being married to someone else and having kids and having a happy life. But at a specific moment in time, she's kind of reminded of her past and of her friends that she made in college. And there's, again, like a specific point in this book where you just know that something horrible is gonna happen and you don't know what it is until the very end. And once again, I cried. I cried a lot. So, this was so tender and raw and also very sad, but so peaceful in the end. I loved, like, I don't know what to tell you. I loved Heart the Lover so much. The title of this book actually comes from a card game that the characters are playing when they are in college. And Heart the Lover is kind of like a specific card in this game. So um, yeah, this was marvelous. Would highly recommend Heart the Lover by Lily King. And then after that, I think this was very close to Christmas. I read this on the 24th, so a day prior to Christmas. But I read The Tailor of Glouchester by Beatrix Potter. And I think, like, if you read this book when you were a kid, you probably have like a lot of nostalgia for it. I personally didn't read it, and I just think it was fine. Like, there's this cutesy tale of this tailor from the town of Gloucester, and he's trying to make some clothes for the mayor of this town, and he unfortunately doesn't have enough kind of like fabric. So the mice from his shop are helping this tailor make this coat for the mayor. And it is just beautifully illustrated, I will give it that. I just wished it to be like a bit deeper, I guess, but at the end of the day, this is made for kids, so I do think it's quite an endearing tale for kids. So yeah, this was The Tailor of Gloucester. It is also very short. I don't know exactly how many pages because I once again read it on my Kindle, but I finished with it in like 30 minutes or something like that. Ooh, okay. Next up, I read Rejection by Tony Tulatimut. I guess it's how you pronounce this author's name. This book was so frustrating and annoying, and I get that that's kind of like the point of these characters. They're meant to be unlikable, but it just ended up being so cringe, and I was having like secondhand embarrassment all throughout reading this book. There's a specific like short story, because this is like a short story collection that centered the theme of rejection, but there's a specific story about this guy who is trying to order a video from like a sex worker online, and he just goes to create this email to send to this creator with all of his kind of like fantasies or kinks, I guess. And there's nothing wrong with that, but at a specific moment during this email, our main character just comes up with a recipe for a fake, how should I say it, bodily fluid, let's say, or bodily secretion. And I was like, okay, this is definitely a choice. But then they also included in the same email the hex code, like the specific color that this fake bodily secretion should be. And at that time, I just like clocked out. I was like, okay, this is just not, this is just not it. Like, it was so stupid. This is rejection, not great, and would not would not recommend. And then last but not least, I read The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. I am so mad at myself for not picking this book up sooner. This was such a breath of fresh air, honestly. This book is fantasy. It is set in like this fantasy world where leviathans exist, and they're kind of like terrorizing the people from the empire because they're huge and they can pretty much destroy the land. But this is not the actual like focus of the story. The book itself is a murder mystery, and we are following this investigator. Her name is Anna, and her assistant Din. And Din is actually our main character, so we are in the point of view of Din, who is an engraver. And an engraver is someone that's been altered, like their actual mind or their brain was altered for them to be able to remember everything that they experience when they are smelling like a specific scent. So he has like all of these vials with all of these scents, and when he's smelling these vials, he's able to remember everything perfectly as it went down. And because of this, his memories are kind of like considered as being facts, as being true by the law from the empire. I love how unique this magic system is, and I don't think I quite experienced something like this magic system in the books that I read so far. So I just love the idea of it. The book itself and the setting and the environment, it just feels like something that's steampunk, but without it being steampunk. Like instead of technology, everything from the empire and from this world is powered by plants and by mushrooms and stuff like that. Like very natural things. It almost feels like Regency era or Victorian era London. That's what I'm envisioning when I'm thinking about this book. Din is interviewing all of these suspects, and it's just so enjoyable to get to experience that and to see how Anna's mind is working, because she's always like 10 steps ahead of everyone. And I just loved how the clues were revealed, because you as reader can piece everything together as it is happening before Anna tells us that that's actually what happened. So yeah, this was really really good. Once again, The Tainted Cup. I am now starting 2026 with the sequel of The Tainted Cup, which is A Drop of Corruption. I only read like 30% of this book, but it just seems to be just as good as the first one. So, once again, would highly recommend The Tainted Cup. I think this is part of an ongoing series, and it is called Shadow of the Leviathan. So, the third book in the series is going to be published, oh, this year in August 2026. I cannot wait for the third installment from this series. And with that, these were all of the books that I read in December of 2025. I cannot wait to share with you some new videos this year. Let me know in the comments down below if you have like a specific type of video that you want to see from me here on the channel. Let me know what you're currently reading. Let me know what's your favorite book of last year. I would like to know that. And I will see you soon with potentially the tier ranking of everything I read in 2025. So see you then, take care, and bye everyone. Thanks for watching.